Welcome to SIP episode 116. Tonight, our holiday episode, and we celebrate with legendary winemaker Tom Rinaldi, founding winemaker at Duckhorn. We discuss everything you can possibly imagine during his 47 vintages in Napa Valley. I start out the episode with the tie-on. Sit back and enjoy. SIP episode 116 with Tom Rinaldi is here. Tonight at SIP episode 116, my name is Martin Cody, co-founder of Cellar Angels, your one and only direct-to-consumer wine curator specializing exclusively in Napa and Sonoma wines. And tonight we have got a very, very special guest on the Christmas holiday episode of the year, our final show of the year. Thank you, Ivy, to everyone. Nice hat. I've had this hat on all day. I've been so excited about this show. You know, when you ascend to greatness, I don't care if it's in sports, if it's in music, you usually are known by one name. In sports, you've got Jordan, Kobe, Shaq, Magic, Kareem. The list goes on and on. Sweetness in football. In music, you've got Bono, you've got Madonna, you've got Prince, you've got Ringo. It never ends. In wine, you have Rinaldi. Tom Rinaldi was the founding winemaker of Duckhorn. He has just completed his 47th vintage in the Napa Valley. He is a legend, not in the making. He is a legend. And we are pleased to have him this evening. I am not even going to show you the Cellar Angels website because I want to spend as much time as possible with Mr. Rinaldi. But I do want to say that last week's quiz question was won by Michael A. The question, the loophole in the 18th Amendment prohibition helped create what? And the answer was E, a spike in the garagiste home winemaking and increase in grape growing in California. So accidentally, the repeal of prohibition helped California, and we are thankful for it. So now, without much further ado, let's get into it with longtime, at least longtime new Cellar Angels friend, and someone that we're going to taste a bunch of wines with this evening because we've got a greasy tonight, not a Scotland, a greasy. So ladies and gentlemen, without much further ado, here is Tom Rinaldi.
Hello, y'all.
How are you, sir? I'm just trying to give you some music from Haight-Ashbury.
I wasn't able to pick it up, unfortunately, but I did live the summer of love.
Our audio group, we've got Mission Control behind the board here and Ivy back in our studios just outside of Burbank, California in Chicago. And we are coming to you live from Naples, Florida. Tom, your episode 116, our 116th episode since we started this in the beginning stages of the pandemic to bring wine lovers together and share some unbelievable wine. And we couldn't be thrilled or more thrilled to conclude this year with you. And I want to get in, first of all, cheers to you. Good to see you again. And I'm so excited to have the patent Sauvignon Blanc.
Cheers.
Chris, Eric, I know Eric. Eric is part and parcel of this. We'll talk about Eric, Hans and Caitlin, Ivy, Jan, two Jans, Jeff, Jim B, Julie, Karen, Kent, Larry, Lori. Good to see you. Michael, Nelson and Liz, Peter, Sean. There's a bunch of people on. Let's start at the beginning. Okay. How old were you when you left the East Coast without say in the matter and came west?
Me? Raised in San Francisco.
Okay, good. Please fire.
My mother was born in Brooklyn and she was conceived in Palermo, Sicily, but she married my father, who was born in San Francisco, to a mother who was born in San Francisco and a father who came over from Italy in early 1900s. So I've never been an East Coast dude.
So your mom had the East Coast and then came west. You were born in San Francisco.
Met during World War II, and my father was a sergeant in the Army, and they hit it off, and that was that. I had my older brother about 1944, and away we go. I'm a 49er from San Francisco.
Well, it doesn't get much more true blood than that. You're not a Fairweather fan. You were born here, so that's fantastic. And you mentioned your father was in the armed services, and you also were in the armed services. How did you make that
Yeah.
decision to go in and get in the Army?
I didn't. I got in the Navy, and I
Or in the Navy,
signed up
rather.
when I was 17, primarily because all the friends around me were starting to get into some crazy, heavy, scary drugs. And I just said, I need to get away. So I signed up at 17, and I had to get my parents to sign, and my dad signed right away. But my mom was a little reluctant, and I told her, this is, I got her to go along with the program. But I had 120 days of reserve to grow up. Basically, the recruiter told me, get rid of all that nonsense, get yourself in great shape, and study the tests, because they're going to test you. And I did all three. And so I aced the test, and I was only one of two out of thousands that aced it. And so they asked me, what do you want to do? And the guy next to me was that close to graduating from UC Berkeley with a degree, and he got the draft notice and said, I didn't go in the Army. So he joined, and he was brilliant. So he said avionics, and I said, avionics, that sounds pretty cool. What's that?
What year was this?
1967.
So
so
this
I
was
just
probably
turned 18.
This is probably a very familiar
There you
scene
go.
in 1967.
That looks like Janis on the bottom left.
It's exactly who it is.
And I met her after her first concert with Janis Joplin and Big Bad, whatever, in the holding company, Big Brother in the holding company. And she was out of control good at farm. Oh God, it was on the marina. And she just knocked them out. Everybody shut up. And I saw her like 2 or 3 weeks later at the Fillmore, and she's walking down the stairs with a styrofoam cup of Southern Comfort. And I got her. I'm going like, you were great. I mean, you had everybody mesmerized. People all the time during the concerts are yammering and shouting at each other, and everybody was, mesmerized. And she said, oh, that's nice. That's awful nice you to say that. She had that Texas drawl. And she thinks I'm buttering her up. I'm not. She was not my type. I'm a virgin kid. And, she wasn't. And that being said, oh my goodness, it was pretty cool. We talked for about 5 minutes, and I'm not buttering her up. I'm just telling her, you're going to go to the moon, but be careful. That was so much screaming there. And not only that, but they had the Hells Angels and the Gypsy Jukers, the motorcycle group there. And one of them spiked the punch. So it was free punch, and you're on LSD. And you don't know what this is. You think maybe this is a flashback or something bad like that. And people were just going berserk at this concert.
I now understand why you decided to go into the Navy.
Yeah, I've never shot up anything. Thank you. No, thank you. And these guys were really starting to get into the snorting and the needles. And no. This is not summer of love anymore. This is summer of crazy.
Yeah.
So thank God I did. And I did well in the military. In fact, I did so well by acing the test and showing up in great shape. I didn't have to get a haircut military style. I didn't have to do boot camp really. I just got to walk around with a clipboard in my hand. So it was pretty nice. And then they sent me back to Memphis, Millington, Tennessee. And my wife doesn't like when I call it, but it's the Naval Air and Technical Training Command. I have a name for it. She's not here. Naval Hair and Testicle Twisting Command. But that being said, you learned avionics, aviation electronics. It was 8 months in Millington, the Navy base there, air base, and we're right outside of Memphis. And I had a motorcycle. I used to go into my apartment in Memphis, and I had all the brothers around me, and it was pretty cool. One day they kicked in my door, and I'm laying in there reading a magazine. And said, "Get your ass out of here!" And I go, "What's going on? Get out now!" I go, "What? What's going on?" And didn't tell me. Just said, "Go." I couldn't pick up my stuff. Just get on the bike and go back to the base 8 miles away. Get on the base, and I'm going, "What's going on in Memphis?" Martin Luther King just got shot. And if I was sitting outside, I would have heard the bang. And they let me go because we got along great. They introduced me to the ribs that fall off the bone. They introduced me to moonshine. We got along great, and oh, thank God, because I wouldn't have made it past that day.
No, yeah. Thank goodness you had some mentors looking after you. How long were you in the Navy?
4 years.
And so was it all in Tennessee, or did you bop around overseas?
Oh no, once I got my okay, and I had already gone through all this crazy SEAL training, and I made it to week 10, and I got this infection in my foot, and they took me to the hospital, and they gave me penicillin, which I turned out to be what do they call it? When you get
allergic?
It didn't work. I had an allergy to it, and oh man, I almost died right then and there. So after about a month in the hospital, go back to Coronado, ready to go on base and finish my last 2 or 3 weeks, and nope, start at week 1. Ding, let me out of here. No, thank you. I had enough of that nonsense.
Rang the bell on week 1.
Yeah, but I ended up on Guam, and I was a typhoon tracker, EC-121 super constellations. And we used to fly into the eye of the typhoon. It had to be 130 knots or 100 miles an hour, otherwise it didn't count. It's tropical depression. I did that 33 times and never, ever, ever got airsick. I was such an exception to the rule. There was sometimes somebody would just go running back to the honey bucket in the back, and then that aroma would just set everybody else off. And I've never thrown up. So it was pretty cool. I got this.
So you would fly into the typhoons and track them on behalf of the military or the weather service, or both?
The world. Yeah, we're the eyes of the world. This was not secret or anything like that. This is before satellites.
Right.
So we were the eyes in the sky. And when we got in the eye, believe it or not, the navigator would get his sextant in the dome, find the North Star, and read out the coordinates. I'd be writing them on this world map, and we're
all the while the plane is bouncing up or down.
And we're bouncing all over. Not in the eye. No, once you got in the eye,
okay, right.
Round and round and round and up and up and up we go. We went in at about 1,800 to 2,000, 1,000 feet, because you would lose 400, 600 feet in a heartbeat, glued to the ceiling, then back down again. But once you're in the eye, everything is smooth and dandy, and then would find the coordinates and read it off to the world, and look out, because we had the night before, and boom, look out, Okinawa, here it comes. So they can move the fleet out, move all the planes, and warn all the people, here it comes. Right. So this is for real. So we were the eyes in the sky. Pretty cool.
So it's super cool. I mean, it's fascinating from that standpoint. And I'm curious, the transition when you leave Guam and come back stateside, and how did you end up in the Bay Area again? And how did you jump from there to wine country?
Well, just quickly to say, I was not only on Guam. We were in Okinawa, we were in Japan, we were in Taiwan, all around the area. So we were flyboys. And in Vietnam, we were way up north, and we were the eyes in the sky to pick up MiGs, SAMs, surface air missiles, and of course, boat traffic. And we would monitor every boat that's heading out from Hanoi down south. And a couple of times I got to go on board and find out that these guys had AK-47s, all kinds of weapons. So I got to do Vietnam every month of 18 months, typically for 4 or 5 days at a time, usually at the end of the month and then the beginning of the month. So I got flight hazardous duty pay and tax-free and all this. So it's kind of a scam, but I think we did a lot of good. I think we did a lot of good. And
you got to take, you did do a lot of good, and you got to take the scams where you can get them. So then you
and
come
it
out.
was a stupid war. I know getting around it, but and I didn't go crazy, thank God. But that being said, when I got back, I had the GI Bill, and I went to Santa Rosa Junior College and took chemistry, biology, biochemistry. I wanted to become a veterinarian. And if worst came to worst, I'd become a medical doctor. So I was taking all these prerequisite classes there, living in Santa Rosa area, Sebastopol and Forestville and so forth. And I had a motorcycle. So I had a job in the city on Sundays, and I worked in a wine shop. And so I would do the deliveries in the city, and they had a van for me to drive around and drop off these typically beer and wine, but it was booze. And I had a good time at it, only Sundays. And I got to meet Santana, the whole group, and they were doing coke, snorting, everything. It was just crazy. I got to meet Bill Graham, all these folks, and just because this was a spot to come to buy champagne in particular, but bubbles. And I didn't realize it at the time, but the guy was dealing coke under, he had it hidden, and he would give him a box that looked like cigars, and it was cocaine. And all these guys were into that stuff. So
if you're just joining us, we're talking about drug trafficking in the 60s.
Yeah.
We will get to wine in a moment. Fun fact, Mission Control and I actually, bring this full circle, we saw Santana in September in Las Vegas. He has a standing gig at the House of Blues that he plays, 8-10 times a year. So other than dealing alcohol and drugs on Sundays and getting into wine, I'm still fascinated. You're going to be a doctor, then you're working at a liquor store that distributes and sells on
primarily
Sunday.
I was getting A's at junior college, and they told me basically I could go to any college in the country, Harvard, you name it, and I'm in, no problem. And I had the GI Bill, so I didn't have to really pay tuition. But I chose Davis because that was the veterinary school. They had a medical doctor school. And when I got there, I started taking these wine classes, and it got really into my blood. I mean, big time. So I got a degree and at the time it was fermentation sciences. And we were the first ones that they started to spin it off. I got a degree in malting and brewing, and I got a degree in enology viticulture. So, wow, I got my choice here. Or I could use all my prerequisites and go to medical school or veterinary school. However, I like to say I met a lot of miserable doctors and a lot of happy winemakers. And it was $100 to apply for either of the schools. And forget about it. I'm gonna become a winemaker somehow.
Well, and it's interesting.
Work as a brewer.
Right. Well, and normally, Tom, I don't always wear a tie. Yes, you're a special guest, but this is my Christmas tie. So I've got these.
Ho, 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 ho.
The city of
Oh,
Chicago and Marshall
wow.
Field in the background, no longer there. I get to wear it once a year because that's what you do with Christmas
Of
ties,
course.
right? But I also understand you had some pretty famous classmates in your class at Davis.
Oh, yeah. There was,
Why don't you?
yeah, Tim Mondavi, Mike Martini, Joel Aiken, let's see, who we had, up there as, well, Bob Levy was a buddy of mine. We went all through college together as pals, for Harlan, he ended up at Harlan. And, Kathy Corison, yeah, we got a boatload of names that I should have written them down before we started.
No, that's incredible. And
'70s
people,
and start forgetting stuff.
I mean, you think about that lineage of Tim and Davi, Kathy Corison, Bob Levy, and where they've gone on, and the tentacles in the wine industry and the trails they've left. It's incredible what you all have done. And so you decide to, thankfully for all of us, you decided to make wine. How did you
My first opportunity was to work in the brewing industry for Anheuser-Busch, and they were building that beautiful brewery in Fairfield. And they interviewed me and they said, you'd be a perfect candidate and to become a master brewer. And so I said, would I get to work in Fairfield? Oh, yeah, yeah, sure. We try to keep the candidates close to home when they're
Right.
brewing. And but first I had to go to St. Louis for 3 years to get my head turned on straight. It would have been boot camp all over again, because they don't want you making beer like you want to make beer.
Oh,
You
right.
make it like the master made it, Anheuser-Busch. You are going to make the beer exactly the same every day, every day, every day. In wine,
Yep.
these 47 vintages, I have not seen two the same. Not seen two the same. And in beer, every day is the same. There's no seasons. I'm sorry. You're going to brew that same beer day by day by day. No, thank you. At least Uber drivers get to go to different locations.
So how did Duckhorn come about?
Well, this was first, I interviewed along with a whole bunch of Davis graduates. They hired at Freemark Abbey a Davis graduate every year. And this was 1976. And I interviewed and did well. So I was one of two people. Another classmate of mine, Rob Davis, who ended up in Jordan, he and I were the final two. And he comes out of the interview with Jerry Looper, who just got honored. He's in Europe for years and years and years, a wonderful man. But he comes out and he goes, good luck, you're going to need it. And so I go in for the interview, and Jerry's asking me questions about working in the laboratory, asking me questions about how do you test titratable acidity? How do you test sugar, fermentable and non-fermentable sugar? How do you test for all these things? I worked at the lab at Davis. They paid me to do the trials for the people who are trying to get their masters, trying to get their doctorate.
Right.
They turn over the samples to me to run the analysis. And that's what I did. I got paid for it. So you're not going to stump me on that question.
So was he asking these questions?
I'm sorry.
Was he asking the questions to try to stump you, or was he asking the questions because this is what they needed? They had nobody that could do it.
But he was very curious to see if I knew my stuff or if I'm just faking it. And he never got out of the lab work, and thank God in a way, because my cellar experience was extraordinarily limited. In fact, I came out to work in 1975 before I graduated at Inglenook, and all I did was work on the bottling line, trying to put capsules on the bottles as they're screaming along. Oh, I hated it. But that being said, he said, well, it's 4:30. What are you going to do the rest of the afternoon? I said, I'm going to go downtown and get a beer. And he goes, may I join you? And I said, sure. So we're having a beer together. And he goes, that was a great answer. All these guys, they want to put a blend together. If I'm putting a blend together, that's 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock in the morning. There's no way. It's just you're not going to, it's the old saying, buy on bread, sell on cheese. If you're going to blend a wine, you're going to do it in the morning before you've had lunch, by golly. And
yeah, but
some
I think
people were able to smoke beforehand and have coffee beforehand, but most of us are trying to be as pure as possible.
I think it's interesting that Freemark Abbey every year interviewed and hired, someone from Davis.
And the kid the year before took over for Jerry. So I'm thinking, now here I go. But no, when June came about, it was time to go. But they didn't want to see me go. So they sent me up to Rutherford Hill that they had just acquired. And so I'm going to work in the cellar at Rutherford Hill. I'm riding my bicycle up that hill. And I show up at 8:11. This is my last time, last time punch clock, chung, 8:11. All the rest of the team, all the Moreno brothers and Moreno family are chung, 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 8:00, 8:00, 8:00. And I get in the cellar and and I don't know what they're saying, but it's get to that pop, because they have an alarm. And when the wine gets up the alarm, I mean, shut off the pump, otherwise it's going to overflow. Turn off the wrong pump. So
oh boy,
no,
trial by fire.
Yeah, and I started on Monday, and by Friday I went to the winemaker Phil Baxter, and I said, Phil, I quit. I'm sorry, I can't do this. You've only been here a week. I go, no, I didn't go to college to do this. This is insanity. He goes, how'd you like to work in the lab? I'd love to work in the lab. So I got to work in the lab, and now it's classical music. And he'd line up 6 glasses in front of me. Which one do you like?
It's like breakfast at the Greasy's.
And so boom, 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 boom. And we're doing different ways of removing hydrogen sulfide, the rotten egg aroma, certain ways of reducing the amount of tannin by fining and so forth, doctoring wines, if you will. And they were convinced I had a magical palate, and I love that kind of work. So he introduced me to Ernie Van Asperen at lunch, and Ernie is starting up a new winery called Round Hill, and they need a winemaker. So boom, they transfer me over. I'm the original winemaker. And what I do is drive around with Ernie up in the North Bay in the morning, and they would have 12, 15 glasses for sale of bulk wine. No. Maybe. The good ones I'd keep close to me. And after a while, I'd have 5 glasses that I said, this is it. And he'd shoo me out of the room, go take the tour and go, taste in the cellar, whatever you want to do. And he'd negotiate a price for the wines that they did for Ernie's and then for Round Hill. And these are all 1974, 75, 76, wonderful vintages. And they're selling these things for a song in bulk. The market wasn't as hot as it became. Once the 76 Paris tasting really hit home, then it changed the market, changed the world, if you will.
Was that
by 1978? I'm riding a motorcycle, and I pull in to meet Dan Duckhorn, who's planting a big tree, and I'm talking to him, and he had 3 recommendations from Rick Foreman, Phil Baxter, and somebody else. I can't remember right this minute, and I feel bad about that. But they all said, you ought to talk to Tom Rinaldi. He's ready to move on to a real deal. And so I mentioned to him that I've done this before too. This happened at Provence. I said, toss my hat in the ring. You're the only hat. And I said, well, I'll consult for you. Consult? I need somebody to make the wine. Okay, fine. So there we go. That was 1978, and they hadn't started a winery yet. They had not made a single anything yet.
So we talked a little bit, and you mentioned the Judgment of Paris in 76, and most of us obviously weren't paying a lot of attention the way you were in 1976 to the wine industry. I've heard it called the wine shot heard around the world, to where it literally just overnight, the optics and lens through which California wine was being looked at changed. And when you were feet on the ground, did you notice it that quickly?
It became noticeable. There are a few idiosyncrasies in there, but the amazing part that happened in Paris with sommeliers from France, chefs, people who were supposedly experts in world wines, and they were convinced this is Chateau Lafite. Whoops, it's Stag's Leap Wine Cellar. No, this has to be Haut-Brion Blanc. Sorry, this is on and on and on. They missed it by a mile. And
yeah,
the French wines were trashed by California wines. And this is all done by French in a blind tasting. Stephen Spurrier from London pulled it off. And I'll be darned, 40 years later, we're doing a tasting. And here I am at the tasting, meeting Stephen Spurrier, kicking it around. We're at a very private tasting, and we're doing the 40-year anniversary. And we had a Pellet red wine, Cabernet, snuck in there. It's all done blind. And by golly, we won the tasting. We won the whole thing. And that was, you talk about flushing your face. This did it. And we had no idea what was what. And I asked him, why didn't you put in the Freemark Abbey high-end Boucher instead of the regular? Well, that's what Jerry Looper gave him. They did it 30 years later in Japan, but this time they put in they did the exact same wines 40 years later, but this time they put in the high end Rutherford,
right
next door to Hewitt Vineyard, and it won the whole thing. And he said, yeah, if they had done the Boucher the first year in 76, boom, there you go, off to the moon.
Let me do this real quickly. I've got a poll question. And it's a little bit, I should have edited it, but when you arrived in California, I should have said when you grew up in California.
Yeah.
Who was the bigger baseball fan, you or your mom? Boy. You can't answer yet. You were, of course, the bigger baseball fan, or your mom was the bigger baseball fan, or neither of you were big fans. You were football fans.
You ready?
Not yet. I see a lot of money coming in from the West Coast. I want to say hello to Doug R. Jan Scotland. If I did not say hello to you earlier, Mike D, Nelson and Liz, Peter, I said hello. Scott, Sean, hello again. Nick. All right, now I'm going to share the results. What's the answer?
My mom, being born in Brooklyn, was a Brooklyn Dodgers fan until she moved to San Francisco and they moved to LA. She was a diehard, blue in the veins Dodgers fan. my two brothers, myself, my dad were diehard Giants fans. And we're kneeling down watching Sandy Koufax throwing a no-hitter against the Giants on KTVU, black and white, Channel 2. And my mom is, and I know damn well this is the only time in my life I ever turned and said, "Shut up, Mom." Oh my God, she was Dodger blue to her final breath. And
That is outstanding.
yeah, it's crazy. And I got Giants uniforms. I could have worn one tonight if you wanted, and a Giants hat. And yeah.
Well, I took off my Santa outfit to kind of, bring.
Oh, there you go, Grateful Dead.
Yep.
I saw
This
their
was
first
allegedly the
concert.
final show. This was the final show in 2015 at Soldier Field.
Wow.
And apparently they're playing again this year at Wrigley. So that was 7 years ago. But I do want to launch this last poll question, and then cameras will be turned on. This one could go a bunch of different ways. The element that I, Tom Rinaldi, enjoy most about wine is creating blends from a new set of ingredients every year, the people I get to meet along the way, biking to work, that it's different every single year. So we'll give folks a little bit of time to chime in while I pour a little bit more wine. And then we're going to talk about the wines. We're going to talk about Eric. We're going to talk about Patent. We're going to talk about Scotland and how he missed 3 episodes in a row. Talk a little bit about I think the only reason why he's here is because Indiana's playing Kansas tomorrow and not tonight, but we'll forgive him. The 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So you've got 47 vintages under your belt. And I'm curious.
You folks know what you're saying, period. Yeah, you're on board. All 58% of you. It's different every year. And that's the beauty of it. In beer, it's the same thing every day. But with wine, we have no idea what we're in for in 2023. We have no idea. And I have not seen 2 of the 47 vintage that I've been involved with be the same, period. But I try to make wine with what I call a thread of consistency. There's a signature in that unique wine from that unique vintage that says, oh yeah, there you go. That's the thumbprint. That's the nose. That's the aroma. That's the finish. That's the characteristic that is stylistic to what I appreciate, to what I try to make for others who appreciate it, period. And that's the same every year. I care about the people paying the money for this stuff. And I really want to make sure it's no matter what vintage. And there have been some, oh my gosh, that's very challenging. Let me just say this, about 78 for Duckhorn was our first vintage. Merlot, 3 palms, Cabernet Sauvignon. That's all we made.
That's it. No golden eye, no decoy, no nothing.
Hot and dry. 76, a drought year, horrible. And so forth. There have been so many very difficult. Hi, Hans and Caitlin. Good to see you. Oh, good to see all you. Oh, it's going to be great to see you all. But that being said, each vintage after the 78 was a disaster. And 79, we didn't make 3 palms. 80, no 3 palms. 81, that's the year I got married. We're going to make a 3 palms. And it was a little food fight. 82, no 3 palms. 83, by then, I just slammed down the hammer. We're going to make it every year and just let people decide whether that's up to their expectations or not. And I'm going to do everything I can legally to make sure that it's as good as it could possibly get. And that's been the ride ever since. And they haven't missed a vintage yet, with the Duckhorn, period.
And it's funny, How many wineries can we put founder or founding winemaker in front of your name? Is it 3 or 4 now, or 5?
Yeah, at least 5. Yeah.
That's impressive. That's really impressive. And let's walk through some of the wines we have this evening. First, we're going to start with a brief mention of Pellet, because it's, by the way, you want to talk about a collector's item? There's no more of this in the world. So there's 8 bottles currently on the Cellar Angels website. They aren't making anymore. They aren't going to produce anymore. They sold the juice. It's unfortunate from this capacity. Tom can tell the story, but I want to talk a little bit about this unoaked Chardonnay. Then I want to move on to the future, which I'm super excited about with patent.
But I think they did not sell the juice. They sold the grapes. But the brand is still theirs, and whatever juice, and we still have some, by golly, 2 whole barrels, 2 whole barrels of Cabernet 2021 was the very final. We just got a touch of it, but it's Merlot. And the Merlot is out of control good. And they pulled the Merlot after that. They cut it up and turned it into Cabernet Sauvignon. Best Merlot I've ever seen in the Napa Valley, period. I'd have to go to Pomerol or Saint Emilion to find better. And so there was a crying shame.
Wait, let's rewind the tape on this for a second.
Sorry.
The person who literally put Merlot on the map in California and the nation is telling us that the Pellet Estate Merlot is the best Merlot you've ever tasted.
It's the best Merlot grape I've ever had my hands on.
And they pulled it.
Yeah.
They replanted.
It's gone forever.
Wow.
It's a heartbreaker for me.
I never had any. It's a heartbreaker.
I had small amounts that I would add to the Cabernet, or maybe in large amounts, to make the reserve. And it always was in the reserve. And the reserve was always worth twice the price.
Tom, if you remember this tasting that you went to at the Staglands with Steven Spurrier,
There you go.
that was the 2013 Henry's Reserve. That was 80% Merlot, 20% Cabernet.
There you go.
And there's no
gentlemen,
no wonder he liked it.
I remember.
That's the partner of Tom Rinaldi, Eric Reish of Patent Wines. So welcome, Eric.
Yeah, hi, I'm Eric Risch.
Awesome. Mike D, I see you saluting, so thank you for that. With the John Daly beard. I like that, Mike. Looks very, very festive. So this is going to be made no more. That's a tearjerk of the Merlot story, unfortunately. But talk to us a little bit about this unoaked Chardonnay.
Well, it's a great story. And Eric is really inspirational on it, because he ordered a very small amount of barrels for the Chardonnay that was coming in. What vintage would that have been, Eric?
Well, that would have been the 2013 vintage. It was what I called the driveway decision, because they should have put
that was a year before I joined. So that being said,
I'm doing the math, Eric, and I think I know where you're going.
They have more Chardonnay than they have barrels. So I got an idea. Let's do one without the oak.
That is awesome.
With oak,
work with what you have.
You literally put the juice into the barrel and it ferments in that barrel. And with that barrel, you let it go through a secondary fermentation, the malolactic fermentation. It turned malic acid, apple acid into lactic acid, milk acid. That being said, that goes on in the barrel, and then it's a whole different animal. With the unoaked, it's straight stainless steel, and you don't dare let it go through secondary fermentation. So it's a whole different animal. And it's delightful, to tell you the truth. And there's different pairings for each of them, but they're unique in their own way. And typically barrels are $1,000 a piece. So if you're buying a fully Chardonnay barrel
More.
fermented and barrel, it's going to cost more, period. But the unoaked, you're only paying for the grade. Yeah.
Do you have that memory where, I mean, after 47 vintages, and you said none of them are the same, every single one, there's different elements throughout the vintage. Are you able to go back and say, aside from the marquee vintages that stand out and that got critical acclaim, like the 2018 Pellet, the 2015 Patent, can you go back and remember these vintages like it was yesterday?
Well, there's no 2015 patent.
I made that up.
All right. Yeah.
So I guess the answer is yes.
To tell you the truth, I just draw on the experience. It's just sort of like having a history book in your brain. And, you remember the big wars, the big assassinations, the big disasters, period. And they're all part of your makeup, if you will. I've had several women who are trying to become winemakers or are winemakers, and they're getting trash here and there by, the owner is a guy, doesn't trust women. And what I try to do with them is say that you know what's good and what's not good. But you have to build up your confidence that you've got enough experience, got enough training and enough education that what I say is what goes, period.
Right.
I'll listen to your input. I'll listen to your opinion. I'll listen to your amounts. I don't care about amounts. I don't care about pricing. I don't care whether it doesn't go or does go to Florida, period. That's not my job. My job is to put the final blend together and make it something that reflects the history. And that's not anywhere near as difficult as it could have been or should have been or might have been in the past. It's just something that flows. And I'm doing up in Washington, and it's fun because I'll have 4 or 5 people sitting around me, representatives from the winery, and they're not saying anything. They're just sort of like, yeah, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. And we're putting 15 SKUs together. It was, those are different blends, different labels. So that it's kind of cool. I think it's cool.
Thankfully, there haven't been many wars in my lifetime. So I remember the 85 Bears and the 2016 Cubs. Really, that's the context of my history book. I knew Doug would appreciate that. He remembers the Ron Yeri years with Minnesota and the Bud Grant years, outdoor football, back in the day when it meant something to be a Viking. I have a question on, let's go patent now, because patent is the future. How did you and Eric come together?
Well, that was through Pellet. I was a winemaker successful, and the previous winemaker was going on a tour of the world on a boat.
Salmon fishing?
Salmon, whatever. Just moving off to way out there.
Oh, he's a great guy.
At least a year. And he wanted to know if I was interested in, this particular project. And I tasted the wines and I tasted the wines out of barrels, got to meet her. And I said, yeah, sign me up. I got time on my hands. I'm not really in over my head anymore. So I signed up for it. And by golly, I just fell in love with those grapes. And we had some interesting beginnings, if you will, from different arenas where you make the wine. And that's crucial. Right. If you have a bunch of clowns running the cellar, you're not going to make what you thought you're going to make. And so you have to really be on your toes for every step of the way. So that happened 1, 2, and finally third time we hit it off. We got the right team. They're on our side. They listen, they care. And we're going to the moon. And so it's been a great ride. We came up with the name, all right, I'm going to say it, Double Plus. And that was going to be the label, because that's what I did on barrels that were so special that I would give them a check or a plus. Ooh, that's good. Or a question mark, or God forbid, an X. I haven't done an X this century, but so with a piece of chalk, after we go through tasting the barrel by barrel by barrel by barrel, and there's unique characteristics from each barrel. It's crazy. I know it is. It's the same damn grape, same everything, but no, it's not the same wine.
So you would go through and taste and kind of take a piece of chalk and write on the barrel the elements with a very, it sounds like a really technical grading system, plus, check plus. So you're putting that Davis degree to work. Check plus plus was really, really good.
No, it'd be plus plus. That was double.
Plus,
No check.
double plus.
Check was just okay. Yeah.
Right.
But a plus was, we got to look at this one, baby. And double plus was out of control. That's reserve. We're not worthy. And it's just special. And it might have been
you've done that all your career
of the barrel. It might have been the amount of oxidation or lack of oxidation that it got. We can't control every aspect of things, but we can certainly isolate the winners. And that's what that process does. I did it in China. I've done it in Russia. I do it in Washington. I've done it throughout the Napa Valley. It's my signature, if you will.
It's your signature grading system.
Yeah. And so when we first came up with the high-end Hewitt, I got this really special bottle of Hewitt and special several barrels. What are we going to call it? Well, he was a Bill Hewitt, William A. Hewitt was the last ambassador to Jamaica. Once he retired from being the last family member to run John Deere tractor, he married John Deere's great granddaughter. So that being said, here we go. Let's call it ambassador. You can't use that. Well, how about double plus?
Oh, you got
Bingo.
double plus.
So that went on the high end. That after I left and Treasury took over, they were charging $500 the bottle. I like to tell people I have $100 pallet, but I usually get 50% off. So that being said, they never patented it. They never trademarked it. They never did an LLC, no nothing. So we did LLC, we did the trademark, we did the patent. No. They're coming at us with the lawyers, and the lawyers are in the neighborhood of $350.
Apparently we have another Zoom
an hour, and they're going to drive us into the ground. So we moved on to patent, and it's great because there's a different patent on each bottle, and each bottle on each varietal. Yeah. So if you have the Cabernet, it's a different. Well, let's do the Cabernet, and that happens to be a press. Okay, a nice press on the Cabernet, whereas it's a corkscrew on the Sauvignon Blanc. And I don't even remember what was on the Rosé, but the Rosé is long gone, and I don't have a single drop in my wine cellar.
Let me.
Eric records that.
Eric might have pirated some of those. Let's talk to me about the Sauvignon Blanc. I'm getting, and I would love anybody to chime in on the chat. And Peter, I will get to that question in a little bit. I'm getting tons of tangerine on the Sauvignon Blanc. Very citrusy, very tropical fruit. Just absolutely a lot of
Sauvignon Blanc, the aromatics show better than all the other Sauvignon Blancs we port next to. all the time. It's just amazing on the aromatics. It hits you right before you even get the glass up to your nose. Almost.
I was going to say it leaps out of the glass. I mean, you can smell it a foot and a half away. It's fantastic.
Yep. And that's the master at work. Excuse the dogs.
Well,
No,
one of the
the
cool
dogs are
parts
fine.
about this is that there is a background, if you look for it, of that oak, because we do a fair amount of oak fermentation for the grape juice. And it makes it rounder, softer, cuts down on the acidity, but it still has plenty of citrus, no question in my mind. And that tangerine is a good call all the way. But deep down inside, you can start picking up that deep vanilla base, if you will. That's the oak. We do a fair amount of very expensive oak barrels for the fermentation. We keep the temperature below 60 degrees, and that's life and death to me. Red wines, they can go 80, 90 plus. It doesn't matter. It's okay. But white wines, no way. You're going to keep it below 60 degrees all the way during the fermentation and make sure it finishes on the lees, all the yeast and so forth to fall out and die. And then stir it in there too, to give it that mouth feel, to give it the roundness that it needs. Otherwise, we'll get that by Semillon. One of these days, we're going to start throwing in more and more Semillon. It's a varietal that adds some bananas, but it's mostly fatness and cuts back on that, I don't call it acrid, but there's a fair amount of acidity that's tangy. And some people want that tangy, and most of us do, tell you the truth. Because I call this my barbecue wine. When I fire up the barbecue, I want a glass of Sauvignon Blanc in my hand, because that's what I'm doing. I don't need to have little snacks with it, make sure it's chicken or, a certain frites. No, it can be all. And, sadly, we don't have any rosé. That lasts about 3 weeks in our world. But
we'll have 125 cases this year.
Poolside wine. What's that?
We'll have 125 cases this year, as opposed to the 75 that sold out in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Well, we'll see if we can make it 3 weeks, but we'll probably release it somewhere May or June or July. It's a poolside wine, period. It's a summer wine, and it's sad we cannot possibly make enough for the demand. It's the crazy thing that happens. It's too much fun.
A special announcement, a holiday gift from the Eric and Tom this evening is that on the website as of late this afternoon is this Cabernet, and it's in my glass. And it is, I would like to have Tom, you talk a little bit about the Cabernet Sauvignon, and then we'll wrap up with kind of the vision for the future and how folks taste with you. But the 2020 Cabernet Oak Knoll District AVA, very secret location. Eric guarded this with a briefcase that was handcuffed to his wrist, and there was people wearing dark glasses behind him when I asked about it. Talk to me about the 2020 Cabernet.
Well, I just poured me some. Yeah. I was getting this mineral leather tobacco, the aromatics that just reflect Cabernet Sauvignon. This is a classic vineyard, and we have a wonderful viticulturist.
What do you mean when someone with 47 vintages under their belt says it's a classic vineyard? What do you mean by that?
There's well-drained. That's crucial. Even though it's valley floor, and being valley floor, you won't get these rude tannins to worry about and to somehow hide. This is straightforward fruit characteristics, fruit aroma, fruit finish. So it's yours to manipulate. And typically I'm a shepherd. I am looking out for wolves. I'm looking out for troublemakers, but otherwise I'm letting the sheep graze, be what they want to be. So I'm out of the way. And we have a certain variety of yeast that we use cultured yeast. Okay. These are Saccharomyces cerevisiae, designed for this type of wine, designed, if you will, by isolating and removing and reproducing. So this is a big deal. The yeast are the real winemakers. I love to take credit. I love to take a salary too, but you know, it's the yeast that convert the alcohol into wine, convert the complex sugars into esters to make the aroma of, you know, those characteristics that we call cocoa or coffee, toffee. I don't add that. I can't make that. I like to
that's
take
what I mean.
It's for it. Yeah.
So tell them how we joke about with people when they ask how the coffee and the chocolate and everything and the tobacco gets wine.
I said, I'm up on the top of the fermenter. I got a bag of coffee, pour it in there. I got a bag of cocoa, pour it in there. Yeah. And honest to God, I had some people going like, wow, that's how they do it.
Yeah.
And
that's how
I found out
tangerine rinds in the Sauvignon Blanc.
You better give them some religion. You better straighten them out on this one. Oops.
So
be careful what you say.
Said this is Tom, you said this was a classic vineyard, and I'm curious, when you are looking for vineyard sources, you and Eric, you know, you've got unbelievable contacts up and down the valley. Are you looking for, like you said, well-drained soil, number one?
Absolutely.
Are you looking for a certain
You're looking for rocks. You're looking for
vines?
What's that?
Certain age of vines? Do you work with younger vines, or does it have to be?
You know, the funny Merlot in particular, unfortunately, this is not Merlot. They could hit it out of the park in their rookie year, but it takes Cabernet about 6 to 8 years before it starts to really show up. So that's the age. Yeah.
Yep.
So that's a big deal. You've got to get those roots deeply established and get them into that pattern of going to sleep in the winter and waking up in the springtime and having just the right amount of flowers. And then we can come through and say, well, it's a lot of flowers, a lot of, and trim back and balance the vine, as opposed to those vines behind you that are highly overcropped. And I would have picked those a long time ago and probably given to somebody else. But that being said, it's a huge decision on the balance of the vine and the date you pick. And to tell you the truth, in the last 4 or 5 years, I have made decisions 2 to 4 weeks in advance of saying, what are you doing Thursday, like in 3 weeks, to the viticulturist? And I got nobody, nothing. I said, put me on board. And they'll start picking those grapes at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning under lights. And by the time we're ready at the winery at 8:30, 8 o'clock, 7:30, boom, here they are. And Napa Valley, if you're out 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning during harvest time, it's cold. It's below 60 degrees. And so perfect. There go nice cold grapes into the fermenter to let them settle before we add the yeast and let them go up to that 80-degree red wine temperature.
And so these angels, after Santa comes and visits them and takes care of them, they're going to want to get out of hibernation and go visit some wine country. How do they taste with you and Eric?
That's an Eric question.
That's a me question. And I mean, Tom and I are pretty busy. I travel a lot, but if I'm around, basically the way we do it is kind of old school. You come over to my house, you sit around my dining room table, or we'll go out in Tom's backyard, sit around, have a conversation for a couple hours, drink some wines, and just talk like normal human beings rather than the commercial aspect of stuff. That's how we roll.
I thought I was a little worried when you said it's old school.
Exactly it. Sorry.
No, that's fine. So they can, Mission Control just threw Eric your email in the chat so they can contact you with regards to that. What is total production?
We're pushing close to 2,000 cases right now. We'll bottle about 1,100 bottles of Sauvignon Blanc, or 1,100 cases of Sauvignon Blanc this spring, followed by the summertime after 2 years in barrel for the red wine. It'll probably be close to 400 cases or so of the Cabernet, down just a little bit from this current production that was at 550, and somewhere around 125 cases of rosé in the late springtime.
So is that a comfortable volume for you? Do you want to get like 3,000 or?
We don't have a specific goal in mind. We're driven by what makes the best wine. We don't have those case count numbers about, people, right. Oh, how big do you want to get? It's like, it's not about how big we get. It's about how much fun can Tom have making this wine and do it well. That's what drives everything.
I like it. I absolutely like it. Finally, size doesn't matter.
No.
Wait a minute. Let's go back here.
Yeah, that's why we measure everything using the metric system.
Awesome. Well, Mr. Rinaldi, sir, it is as always a pleasure to see you. Eric, thanks for jumping on. Sure. I couldn't think of a better duo to conclude this year's final episode with than Eric and Tom and Patent Wines. I think some of you took care of the Pellet Estate Chardonnay on the Cellar Angels website. That appears to be all gone. Eric may have some. The Patent Sauvignon Blanc and the Cabernet Sauvignon are the Cabernet Sauvignon, by the way, for 2020 is fantastic. I mean, it's only been open now for about 45 minutes, and it is crazy good.
Well, a lot of the reviewers I've talked to that I've obligatory to have to send it out to, they've been giving us in the low 90s and the scores and everything. They're like, I can't wait till we visit this because this is going to get better with age. And we're going to be one of the few producers on the Valley floor that actually puts out a 2020 because, you're not going to see any mountain fruit from 2020.
No, exactly. And, are off for the holidays. We are going to be back on January 13th with Cindy Costco. The Cabernet Sauvignon Wine Club members get 10% off of that. That's our gift to you. It's the gift that keeps on giving. And there is an unbelievable lineup coming up in January. We got through 2.5 years of a pandemic because of great winemakers practicing their craft, and we get to be the recipients and benefactors of their skills. And boy, Mr. Rinaldi, I don't want to see you get better with age because I don't see you slowing down, but it is an absolute treat to have this wine in my glass tonight from you. Sipsters, I say it every week, take care of one another. Your kindness keeps us going. Merry Christmas, happy holidays. Eric, Tom, everyone, be good. Cheers, talk soon.